The sun hung like a brass button against the bleached Texas sky, baking the dirt streets of Dry Creek until they cracked like old leather. Emma Ward pressed her back against the rough wooden wall of the Red Cactus Saloon, stealing a moment's rest before the evening rush. At 19, she'd already learned that standing still too long in this place invited trouble, but her feet ached something fierce, and Big Sal wouldn't notice if she took just a minute. "Emma, get your lazy hide back in here," Sal's voice boomed from inside. "These glasses won't wash themselves." Emma sighed, smoothing down her faded calico dress, one of two she owned. Both patched so many times she'd lost count. The other girls who worked the Red Cactus wore bright silks and showed considerably more skin. But Emma had made it clear from her first day 6 months ago she served drinks and food, nothing more. Sal had grumbled, but agreed good help was hard to find, even help that wouldn't entertain the customers upstairs. Inside, the saloon reeked of tobacco smoke, spilled whiskey, and unwashed men. Tom, the house musician, nodded at her from his corner, fingers dancing over his battered guitar. He was one of the few who treated her with genuine kindness, perhaps because he knew what it was like to be looked down upon, a colored man making music in a white man's establishment. "There she is," Martha called from the kitchen doorway. The cook, a woman somewhere past 50 with arms like ham hocks, beckoned Emma over. "Got some bread and beans set aside for you. Child, eat quick before Sal sees." Emma's stomach growled. She'd been living on one meal a day, sometimes two if Martha took pity on her. Every penny she earned went toward paying off her father's burial debt. $200 to the undertaker might as well have been $2,000 for all the hope she had of clearing it. "Thank you, Martha." Emma wolfed down the food, barely tasting it. "Slow down 'fore you choke. That debt ain't going nowhere." Martha's eyes softened. "How much you got left?" "160. Emma wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "At this rate, I'll be 30 before I'm free of it." "Could be worse. Could be working upstairs." Emma shuddered. She'd rather starve. The saloon door swung open, admitting a group of cowboys fresh from the range. They brought with them the smell of horses, sweat, and 3 days' worth of dust. Emma recognized them hands from the Dixon spread, rough men who'd been drinking since noon by the look of them. "Well, well," the largest one slurred, his eyes finding Emma immediately. Jake Morrison, she remembered. Mean drunk, meaner sober. If it ain't the little Virgin Mary of the Red Cactus. Emma grabbed a tray and started collecting empty glasses. Ignoring him, it was always best to ignore them. But Jake wasn't having it. He lurched forward, grabbing her wrist hard enough to make her gasp. The glasses on her tray rattled dangerously. "I'm talking to you, girl. Sal says you're too good for the rest of us. That true?" "Let go!" Emma kept her voice steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "Please." "Please," Jake laughed, ugly and wet. "Boys, she said please. Ain't that sweet?" His friends joined in the laughter. The saloon, which had been buzzing with conversation, fell quiet. Everyone watched, but no one moved to help. That was the way of things in Dry Creek. You minded your own business if you valued your hide. Jake's grip tightened. "Maybe I should teach you some manners. Show you what you're missing, keeping yourself all pure and—" "Touch her again and you won't have enough fingers left to count your pay." The voice came from the doorway, low and cold as a January morning. Emma's head snapped up to see a man silhouetted against the late afternoon sun. As he stepped inside, the light revealed weathered features, dark hair touched with premature silver at the temples, and eyes the color of winter sky. He wore his gun low on his hip, the leather worn smooth from use. Colt Harlan. Everyone in Dry Creek knew who he was. Owned the Harlan Range 10 miles north, kept to himself mostly, and had buried his wife 5 years back. He came to town maybe once a month for supplies, never stayed long, never caused trouble, but there was something about him that made even hard men step carefully. Jake released Emma's wrist, but his drunk courage flared. "This ain't your concern." "Harlan, I'm making it my concern." Colt moved into the saloon with the easy grace of a man comfortable with violence. "The lady asked you to let go, where I come from. That's the end of it." Lady Jake spat on the floor. "She's just another saloon." He never finished the sentence. Colt's fist connected with his jaw, sending him sprawling into a table. Poker chips scattered like coins at a wedding. Jake's friends started forward, hands moving toward their guns, but stopped when they saw Colt's hand resting casual-like on his Colt .45. "Your friend's drunk," Colt said conversationally. "Take him back to the Dixon place. Let him sleep it off. Tomorrow, he'll remember his manners." He paused. "Or I'll remind him." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Jake's friends hauled him to his feet, muttering and cursing, but they went. The saloon held its breath until the doors swung shut behind them. Colt turned to Emma. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the weariness that seemed to go bone deep. "You hurt?" She shook her head, not trusting her voice. "Good." He touched the brim of his hat, a gesture of respect she wasn't used to receiving. "Ma'am." He turned to go, but Sal's voice stopped him. "Harlan, you can't just come in here, busting up my customers." "Your customer was about to damage your property." Colt's voice stayed level. "I protected your investment." Sal's face went red. Emma was not property. She wanted to shout, but she knew better. In Sal's eyes, in everyone's eyes, that's exactly what she was. "Besides," Colt continued, "the Dixon boys will be back tomorrow, spending twice as much to prove they're not scared, bad for business, letting them run off your help." The logic was cold, practical, and Sal couldn't argue with it. He grumbled but wadded back to the bar. Colt looked at Emma one more time. "You work every night?" "Except Sundays." The words came out before she could stop them. He studied her for a moment longer, then left without another word. The saloon exploded into gossip the second the doors closed behind him. "Did you see that? Colt Harlan, defending a saloon girl. Must be looking for a new wife. Bet she's been warming his bed already." Emma's cheeks burned. She gathered the scattered poker chips with shaking hands, aware of every eye on her. This was worse than Jake's grabbing. At least that was expected. Normal, even. But Colt Harlan's intervention, that would have the whole town talking. "Back to work," Sal bellowed, and the crowd reluctantly returned to their drinks and cards. Martha pulled Emma into the kitchen. "You all right, child?" "I'm fine." But her hands wouldn't stop shaking. "That was something. Wasn't it Colt Harlan himself?" Martha shook her head. "Haven't seen him take interest in anything but cattle and whiskey since Catherine died." "He wasn't taking interest. He was just—" Emma trailed off. What had he been doing? "Being decent." Tom supplied from the doorway. "Which is rare enough in this town to cause a stir." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Emma served drinks, cleared tables, avoided grabbing hands with practiced ease, but she felt the weight of speculation in every glance, heard her name in every whispered conversation. By the time the Red Cactus closed at 2 a.m, she was exhausted. "You can go," Sal grunted, counting the night's take. "But don't think this changes anything. You still owe me 6 nights a week, and I won't have you putting on airs because Harlan threw a punch for you." Emma nodded, too tired to argue. She stepped out into the cool desert night, grateful for the clean air after hours of smoke and stale breath. The stars spread above her like spilled salt, and for a moment, she let herself imagine being somewhere else, anywhere else. Miss Ward. She jumped, heart racing. But it was only Sheriff Harlow stepping out of the shadows. The lawman was one of the few good men in Dry Creek, trying his best to keep order in a place that resisted it. "Sheriff." She pulled her thin shawl tighter. "Something wrong?" Just making rounds. He fell into step beside her as she headed toward her rooming house. Heard there was some trouble earlier. It's over now. Is it? The sheriff's weathered face was thoughtful. Luther Pike was in my office an hour ago. Says Harlan's getting above himself, interfering with honest men's fun. Emma's stomach dropped. Luther Pike owned the Silver Spur Saloon, along with half the businesses in Dry Creek. If he was taking interest in tonight's events, it meant trouble. Nothing happened, she said quickly. Mr. Harlan just... I know what happened. Sheriff Harlow stopped walking. Listen to me. Emma, you're a good girl trying to make an honest living in a dishonest place. But Colt Harlan's got his own demons, and Luther Pike's got a long memory. You'd be wise to keep your head down for a while. I always keep my head down. Maybe so. The sheriff touched his hat. You need anything, you come find me. Don't matter what time. He waited until she was safely inside the boarding house before continuing his rounds. Emma climbed the narrow stairs to her room. A single bed, a washstand, and a small window overlooking the alley. She'd lived in worse places. As she got ready for bed, her mind kept circling back to that moment in the saloon, the way Colt Harlan had said "lady" like he meant it, the controlled violence in his movements, the weariness in his eyes that matched her own. She rubbed her wrist where Jake had grabbed her. Tomorrow. There would be bruises. Tomorrow. The whole town would be talking. Tomorrow. She'd have to face it all again. The leers, the whispers, the grabbing hands. But tonight, for just a moment, someone had stood up for her. Someone had seen her as worth defending. It was probably nothing. Men fought in saloons all the time. By next week, everyone would have forgotten. Still, as Emma drifted off to sleep, she found herself wondering when Colt Harlan might come to town again. Outside, a coyote howled at the moon, and the desert wind whispered secrets through the cracks in the walls. Dry Creek slept, but restlessly, as if sensing that something had shifted. Some invisible line had been crossed. In his office above the Silver Spur, Luther Pike stood at the window, smoking a cigar and thinking. He'd waited 5 years for Colt Harlan to show weakness, to give him an opening. Maybe, just maybe, he'd found it. A saloon girl. Luther smiled around his cigar. Yes, that would do nicely. The red dust of Dry Creek settled over everything, the buildings, the streets, the people. It worked its way into every crack and crevice, staining everything the color of dried blood. You could wash and wash, but you never really got clean. Emma Ward would learn that soon enough. The wagon jolted over another rut, and Emma gripped the wooden seat to keep from sliding. 3 days had passed since Colt Harlan's offer. 3 days of whispers growing louder, of Sal's temper growing shorter, of Luther Pike's men accidentally bumping into her on the street. When Colt had returned to the Red Cactus, clean-shaven and formal as a preacher, to offer her a position as housekeeper at his ranch, she'd said yes before he'd even named the salary. "Road's rough," Colt said, his eyes on the dusty trail ahead. "Gets better once we pass Skeleton Ridge." Emma nodded, though she suspected he was lying. Nothing about this journey suggested ease ahead. The October sun beat down mercilessly, and her traveling dress her better one, though that wasn't saying much, stuck to her back with sweat. How far to the ranch? Another hour, maybe less. He glanced at her sideways. You can still change your mind. I'll take you back, no questions asked. I won't change my mind. Even though the whole town thinks... He stopped himself. I know what they think. Emma lifted her chin. They thought it before you offered me this job. At least now I'll be earning honest wages for their gossip. Something that might have been a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. $60 a month, plus room and board. Sundays off if you want them. Martha, you know Martha from the Red Cactus. She comes out twice a week to help with heavy washing and canning. You'll manage the house, the everyday cooking. Keep the accounts straight. I can read and cipher well enough. I know. Tom told me you helped him with his letters. Emma looked at him in surprise. She hadn't known anyone had noticed her teaching Tom to read better, working with him in the quiet afternoon hours before the saloon opened. The trail curved, and suddenly the land opened up before them. The Harlan Range spread out like a kingdom of grass and stone, bordered by red rock ridges and dotted with scrub oak. In the distance, she could see cattle grazing, their shapes wavering in the heat like a mirage. "It's beautiful," she said without thinking. "It's dry as bones and twice as unforgiving." But there was affection in his voice. "Been in my family since before Texas was a state. My father fought Comanche for it, nearly died twice defending it. Now it's just me and the hands trying to keep it alive." The ranch house came into view as they crested a low hill. Emma's heart sank a little. The two-story structure looked like it had been grand once-wide porch, tall windows, cedar shingles on the roof, but neglect showed in every line. Paint peeled from the walls. Shutters hung crooked, and weeds choked what might have been a garden. "I know how it looks," Colt said quietly. "Haven't had the heart to keep it up since—" He trailed off, but Emma knew, since his wife died. They pulled up to the front porch, and a man emerged from the barn, stocky, bearded, with the rolling gait of someone more comfortable on horseback than on foot. Boss." He nodded to Colt. Then his eyes found Emma. Something flickered across his face: surprise, disapproval, calculation. "Frank, this is Miss Ward. She'll be keeping house for us. Emma, Frank Dooley, my foreman." Frank touched his hat brim, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Ma'am, didn't know we were hiring house help." "Now you do." Colt's tone suggested the discussion was over. "Tell the boys there'll be proper meals starting tomorrow. And Frank, anyone has a problem with Miss Ward being here, they can draw their pay and ride on." Frank's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "I'll spread the word." He ambled off, and Emma had the distinct feeling she'd just made an enemy. Colt helped her down from the wagon, his hands careful and impersonal at her waist. "Come on, I'll show you around." The inside of the house was worse than the outside. Dust covered every surface like a shroud. Cobwebs draped the corners, and the air smelled of neglect and old sorrow. In the parlor, a portrait of a woman watched from above the fireplace, blonde hair, kind eyes, a smile that suggested she laughed often. "Catherine," Colt said unnecessarily, "painted the year we married." Emma studied the portrait. Catherine Harlan had been beautiful in an effortless way. The kind of woman who belonged in a place like this, who could make a house a home. She was lovely. She was. He turned away. "Your room's upstairs, second door on the right. Has its own lock. I bunk with the hands in the quarters out back, been doing that since—" He gestured vaguely. "Anyway, you'll have the house to yourself at night." Emma understood. He was protecting her reputation as much as possible, maintaining boundaries. It was more consideration than she'd expected. Her room was simple but clean, the only clean room in the house. She suspected. Iron bedstead, washstand, cedar wardrobe, a small desk by the window. Someone had placed fresh linens on the bed and a pitcher of water on the washstand. "I had Tom's wife, Sarah, come out yesterday to ready it," Colt explained. "Figured you'd want a clean place to start." "Thank you." Emma set down her carpet bag containing everything she owned in the world. "When would you like me to begin?" "How about you get settled today? Tomorrow's soon enough to tackle the rest." He paused in the doorway. "Supper's at 6. Cookie, that's our camp cook, usually sends something over. After tomorrow, that'll be your job, if that suits you." "It suits me fine." He left her alone, and Emma sank onto the bed. Suddenly overwhelmed, the house felt like a tomb, full of another woman's ghost. What had she gotten herself into? But then she remembered Jake Morrison's hands on her wrist, Luther Pike's oily smile, The endless nights at the Red Cactus with nowhere to go but down. She stood, squared her shoulders, and unpacked her few belongings. By evening, she'd explored the house thoroughly. The kitchen was a disaster, but well-equipped. The pantry held plenty of stores, flour, beans, preserved meats, canned goods. She could work with this. The other rooms were thick with dust, but structurally sound. It would take weeks to clean properly, but she'd done more with less. Supper was an awkward affair. She ate in the kitchen while male voices drifted from the bunkhouse. Cookie, a grizzled man who looked like he'd been dried and preserved by the desert sun, brought her a plate of beans and cornbread. "You the new housekeeper?" He studied her with shrewd eyes. "The one from the Red Cactus?" "Yes." He chewed on his pipe stem. "Well, I reckon everybody deserves a fresh start. You need anything from my kitchen, you ask, but don't go reorganizing nothing. I know where everything is." It was as close to acceptance as she was likely to get. That night, Emma lay in the strange bed listening to unfamiliar sounds wind in the eaves. Coyotes in the distance, the creak of old wood settling. The house felt enormous around her, full of shadows and memories that weren't hers. She rose at dawn, dressed in her work clothes, and tied her hair back. If this was to be her fresh start, she'd meet it head on. The kitchen came first. She heated water, located soap and rags, and began the battle against years of bachelor neglect. By the time Colt appeared in the doorway, she'd scoured half the surfaces and had biscuits rising in the oven. "You're up early." He looked surprised to find her there, as if he'd half expected her to have vanished in the night. "So are you." She wiped her hands on her apron, one of Catherine's, found in a drawer. "Coffee's ready if you want some." He poured himself a cup, tasted it, and his eyebrows rose. "This is good." "It should be. I've been making coffee for cowboys since I was 12. They stood there awkwardly, the kitchen warming between them. Finally. Colt cleared his throat. "I'll be out with the hands most of the day, if you need anything." "I'll be fine." She turned back to her work, giving him an excuse to leave. The days fell into a rhythm. Emma rose early, prepared breakfast, packed lunches for the men who'd be out on the range. She cleaned room by room, methodically reclaiming the house from its neglect. In the afternoons, she worked on the account books. Colt had mentioned they were a mess, but she had a head for numbers. The ranch hands kept their distance at first, nodding politely but saying little. Frank Dooley remained coldly correct, never quite rude enough to call out, but never friendly either. Only Martha, who came Wednesdays and Saturdays, offered real companionship. "This place is already looking better," Martha said on her second visit, surveying the gleaming kitchen. "Haven't seen it shine like this since Miss Catherine passed." "Were you here then when she was alive?" Martha's face softened. "I was. Sweet lady. Always laughing. She and Mr. Colt, they were something to see together. When she died having the baby..." She shook her head. "He blamed himself something terrible. Doctor said there was nothing to be done. But you know men. Always think they should be able to fix everything." Emma filed this information away. It explained the untouched portrait, the abandoned house, the way Colt held himself apart from everything. By the second week, some of the hands had warmed to her. They appreciated hot meals, clean clothes, and the small touches she added: wildflowers on the table, curtains washed and pressed, the smell of fresh bread drifting from the kitchen. Even Cookie admitted her biscuits were passable. But not everyone was pleased with the changes. She was carrying water from the well one evening when she heard voices from around the corner of the barn. "Playing house with a saloon girl. It ain't decent." Frank Dooley's voice carried clearly. "She cooks good," another man protested. "And she keeps to herself." "That's what makes it worse, acting all proper, like butter wouldn't melt. But we all know what she really is." "Maybe she's trying to better herself." Frank snorted. "A dove don't become an eagle just by changing its nest." Mark my words, this'll end badly. For her and for the boss. Emma set down the water buckets carefully, her hands shaking with anger and hurt. She'd known this would happen, known that leaving the red cactus wouldn't erase what people thought of her. But hearing it still stung. Something wrong? She jumped. Colt stood behind her, his expression unreadable. No, She gestured helplessly at the buckets. He looked from her to the barn, and his jaw tightened. Without a word, he picked up both buckets and carried them to the house. At the kitchen door, he paused. Frank Dooley's a good foreman, but he's got a narrow mind. Don't let him chase you off. I won't. She met his eyes steadily. I've heard worse. I imagine you have. He set down the buckets. For what it's worth, I think you're doing fine work here. The house feels alive again. It was the most he'd said to her since she'd arrived. Emma felt warmth bloom in her chest, quickly suppressed. She was here to work, nothing more. That night, as she wrote in the account ledger by lamplight, she heard horses approaching, male voices, slurred with drink, called out crude suggestions. She recognized some of them men from town, full of liquid courage and bad intentions. Come on out, Emma, we know you're in there. Just want to welcome you proper-like to your new position. Her hands trembled as she reached for the kitchen knife. The locked doors suddenly seemed flimsy as paper. Then she heard Colt's voice, cold and carrying, "You boys lost. Just paying a social call. Harlan. On my property, after midnight, drunk as skunks, that's not a social call. That's trespassing." Now hold on. The unmistakable sound of a rifle being cocked cut through the night. I'll count to 10. Anyone still here when I'm done counting gets to explain to Sheriff Harlow why they've got buckshot in their hide. He didn't need to count. The horses wheeled and galloped away, the voices fading into the distance. Emma heard boots on the porch, then a quiet knock. "It's me. You all right?" She opened the door. Colt stood there with his rifle, hair mussed from sleep, wearing only pants and an undershirt. Behind him, she could see other ranch hands stationed around the yard, armed and alert. "I'm fine, thank you." He nodded, started to turn away, then stopped. "This is why I wanted you to have the house at night. The boys and we'll keep watch for a while, until folks get used to the new arrangement. You don't have to." "Yes, I do." His voice was firm. "I brought you here. That makes you my responsibility. Nobody threatens people under my protection." The words were practical, not romantic, but Emma felt them lodge somewhere deep in her chest. Protection. When was the last time anyone had offered her that? "Thank you," she said again, inadequately. He touched his hat brim. He'd grabbed it even in his haste and disappeared into the darkness. But she saw him stationed on the porch, rifle across his knees, standing guard. Emma returned to her ledgers, but the numbers blurred. Outside, she heard the quiet voices of men taking shifts, protecting her honor or at least her safety. It was more than she'd had in years. Maybe Frank Dooley was right. Maybe this would end badly. But for now, she had work, wages, and a locked door between her and the world. For now, it was enough. The house on Rocky Hill stood against the darkness, no longer quite so lonely. Inside, a woman worked by lamplight, transforming neglect into order. Outside, a man kept watch, protecting what he'd claimed as his responsibility. Neither of them called it anything more than that. Not yet. The smell hit them first, acrid smoke carried on the October wind like a harbinger of doom. Emma looked up from the washing line where she'd been hanging sheets, squinting at the southern horizon. Black clouds boiled up against the pale sky, too dark for thunderheads. "Fire!" The shout came from the barn. Pete Morrison, no relation to Jake, thankfully came running toward the house. "Grass fire moving north, boss, wants all hands." Emma dropped the wet sheet back in the basket. She'd been at the Harlan Range for 3 weeks now, long enough to know that grass fires were the devil's own curse in dry season. The land hadn't seen proper rain in 2 months. Colt appeared from nowhere, already mounted on his bay gelding. "Pete, get every man who can ride. Tom, start moving the remuda to the east pasture. Frank?" He looked around, frowning. "Where's Frank?" "Haven't seen him since breakfast." Cookie called from the bunkhouse. Colt's expression darkened, but there was no time to wonder about missing foremen. "Emma, fill every vessel you can find with water, soak blankets, grain sacks, anything that'll hold moisture. If the fire jumps the creek..." He didn't need to finish. If the fire jumped the creek, the house and outbuildings would be in its path. Emma ran for the kitchen, her mind already cataloging resources. The next hour blurred into frantic preparation. She hauled water, soaked blankets, helped Tom's wife Sarah move the chickens to safety. Through it all, smoke thickened on the horizon, and the wind picked up, hot and angry. The first of the cattle appeared around noon, a handful of steers wild-eyed with panic, running ahead of the main herd. Then came the flood, hundreds of heads streaming across the rangeland. Cowboys riding hard to keep them bunched and moving east, away from the fire's path. Emma had never seen anything like it. The ground shook under thousands of hooves. Dust rose in choking clouds, mixing with smoke until the air itself seemed solid. Through the chaos, she spotted Colt on his bay, working the flank with 2 other riders, turning back strays with an economy of motion that spoke of years in the saddle. Miss Emma, Tom, appeared at her elbow, leading a spotted mare. "Boss says you might need to ride, just in case." Emma's stomach dropped. She'd been on a horse exactly twice in her life, both times as a child. "I don't..." "This here's Daisy. Gentlest thing on 4 legs, if we gotta run. You hold tight to the horn and let her follow the others. She'll keep you safe." He adjusted the stirrups, showed her how to mount. Emma's split skirt, a practical addition to her wardrobe since arriving, made it easier than she'd expected. Daisy stood patient as a saint while Emma found her balance. "Remember," Tom said, "trust the horse. She knows more than you do." Then he was gone, back into the swirling chaos of men and cattle and smoke. Emma sat frozen in the saddle, praying she wouldn't need to actually ride anywhere. The main herd had passed when she saw it, a section of fence to the north, cut clean through. Not broken by panicked cattle, but deliberately severed, wire ends gleaming in the smoky light. Her blood ran cold. This was no accident. Emma Colt materialized beside her, his face streaked with soot and sweat. His eyes went immediately to the cut fence. "Damn it to hell! Someone did this on purpose." "Yeah," his voice was grim. "Question is whether they set the fire too, or just took advantage." He wheeled his horse. "Can you make it to the house?" "Yes, but..." "Go, now. Stay inside until I come for you." But Emma had spent too many years reading the moods of dangerous men to miss the fear under his command. "What aren't you telling me?" He hesitated, then leaned closer. "That's the fence between us and Luther Pike's spread. If our cattle mixed with his during the panic..." He didn't need to finish. Mixed herds meant disputed ownership, legal battles, potential ruin for the smaller rancher. A shout from the south interrupted them. The fire had crested the ridge, a wall of orange and black that seemed to eat the very sky. It was moving faster than Emma had imagined possible, driven by the relentless wind. "Go!" Colt spurred away, shouting orders. "Backfire along the creek, move!" Emma kicked Daisy into motion, clinging to the saddle horn as the mare broke into a trot. Around her, the ranch exploded into organized chaos. Men rode out with torches, setting controlled fires to rob the main blaze of fuel. Others beat at spot fires with wet blankets, their face masks of determination and fear. She made it to the house, sliding off Daisy with trembling legs, but she couldn't just hide inside while others fought for the ranch. She tied the mare to the porch rail and ran to help Sarah, who was struggling to move the water barrels. The next hours were a blur of smoke and sweat and terror. The backfire held at the creek, but burning debris carried on the wind started spot fires everywhere. Emma found herself beside the cowboys, beating at flames with a wet grain sack until her arms screamed and her lungs burned. At some point, she couldn't say when Frank Dooley reappeared, reeking of whiskey and making excuses about checking the eastern boundary. Colt didn't even look at him, just pointed to a fire line and snapped, "Work or get out." As the sun began to sink, staining the smoky sky blood red, the wind finally began to die. The main fire had burned itself out against the backfire in the creek, leaving a blackened wasteland where pasture had been that morning. Spot fires still smoldered, but the immediate danger had passed. Emma found herself sitting on the porch steps, too exhausted to stand. Her dress was ruined, her hands were blistered, and everything tasted of ash. Around her, men sprawled where they'd dropped, passing water buckets and whiskey bottles with equal reverence. Colt emerged from the smoke like a ghost, his clothes charred, a burn across his left cheek. He stopped when he saw her, something unreadable crossing his face. "You were supposed to stay inside. You were supposed to have a full crew." She nodded toward Frank, who was conspicuously avoiding everyone's eyes. "Seems we both had to improvise." He sat beside her on the steps, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. They watched the men working to contain the last of the spot fires, neither speaking. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. Finally, Colt said, "We lost maybe 200 acres. Could have been worse. Would have been if—" He glanced at her sideways. "You did good today. Didn't expect a house key, didn't expect you to stand with us like that." "This is my home too now." The words came out before she could stop them. "I mean, my job, my responsibility." "Home," he repeated quietly. Catherine used to say that. Said a place wasn't really home until you'd fought for it. It was the most he'd spoken of his wife since Emma arrived. She wanted to ask more, but Tom approached, hat in hand. "Boss, we got a problem. That cut fence Pike's men are already rounding up cattle with mixed brands, saying any cow on their side of where the fence was is theirs by right." Colt's jaw tightened. "How many?" "Maybe 50, 60 head, including that prize bull you bought last spring." Emma felt Colt tense beside her. That bull had cost more than she'd make in a year she'd seen the accounts. Losing it could mean the difference between profit and loss. "Let them go," Colt said finally. "For now." Tom looked shocked. "Boss?" "I said let them go. We'll handle it legal-like. Get Sheriff Harlow out here tomorrow to document the cut fence." He stood, fatigue evident in every line of his body. "Everyone gets double rations of whiskey tonight. Cookie. Break out the good stuff." A tired cheer went up from the men. As they dispersed toward the bunkhouse, Colt turned to Emma. "You should get some rest. You've more than earned it." "So should you. That burn needs tending." He touched his cheek as if just remembering the injury. "It's nothing." "It's not nothing." Emma stood. Decision made. "Come to the kitchen. I'll clean it properly." He could have refused, could have maintained the careful distance between them. Instead, he followed her into the house. The kitchen was one of the few rooms untouched by smoke damage. Emma lit the lamps, pumped fresh water, found clean cloths and the bottle of carbolic Martha kept for wounds. Colt sat at the table, watching her work with tired eyes. "This'll sting," she warned, dabbing at the burn. He didn't flinch, though she knew it had to hurt. Up close, she could see other marks: singed eyebrows, blisters on his hands, a dozen small burns on his forearms where embers had landed. "Why didn't Frank sound the alarm?" she asked quietly. He had to have seen the smoke. Colt's expression hardened. "That's a question I'll be asking him, after I ask why he was meeting with Pike's men at the Silver Dollar last week." Emma's hand stilled. "You think he—" "I don't think anything yet, but that fence didn't cut itself." He caught her wrist gently when she started to pull away. Emma, what happened today if Pike's behind it? It won't stop here. He wants this ranch. Has for years. Maybe I should... Should what send me back to town, back to the red cactus? She met his eyes steadily. I've survived Luther Pike's games before. At least here I've got honest work and good people around me. Good people. His thumb moved absently over her wrist, tracing the faded bruises Jake Morrison had left. Is that what we are? Some of you. She didn't pull away from his touch. The ones who fight for what's theirs instead of stealing what isn't. They stayed frozen like that for a moment, connected by more than just his hand on her wrist. Then voices outside broke the spell, and Colt stood abruptly. Thank you for the doctoring, and for... He gestured vaguely. Today, Mr. Harlan. Colt. The correction came quick. I think after today, you've earned the right to use my name. Colt. She tested it, liked how it felt. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to bring its own troubles. He touched his hat brim, a gesture that was becoming familiar, and left. Emma cleaned up the medical supplies, trying not to think about how her wrist still tingled where he'd touched it. Outside, she could hear the men talking around the bunkhouse fire, their voices carrying on the still air. The story of the day was already growing in the telling the desperate fight, the cut fence, the boss's woman who'd stood with them against the flames. The boss's woman? Emma knew she should object to the label, but after today, it didn't sting like it might have. She'd earned her place here with sweat and courage, not by warming anyone's bed. Let them call her what they would. She went upstairs to her room, stopping at the window to look out over the darkened range. Patches still glowed where fires smoldered, like fallen stars against the black earth. Tomorrow there would be accusations and legal battles. Frank to confront and Pike to outmaneuver. Tomorrow the real fight would begin. But tonight, she was home. Soot-stained and exhausted, but home. And somewhere out there in the dark, a man who'd called her by her name was standing guard over what remained of his land, just as he'd stood guard over her. Emma pressed her palm against the window glass, still warm from the day's heat. She'd come to the Harlan Range looking for nothing more than honest work and wages. What she'd found was something else entirely, a place worth fighting for, people worth standing beside, and maybe, just maybe, something worth hoping for. In the distance, a coyote howled, and the night wind carried away the last of the smoke. The fire had tested them all, revealing character in ways that peaceful times never could. Some, like Frank, had been found wanting, but others had proven themselves in the crucible of crisis, including, Emma realized with quiet pride, herself. The storm came without warning, as desert storms often did. One moment the November sky was clear, the next, black clouds rolled over the mountains like an avalanche. Emma had been in town for supplies when the first fat raindrops splattered the dusty street. Better hurry, Miss Ward. Samuel at the general store warned, loading her wagon with urgent efficiency. This one's going to be a gully washer. But she was only halfway back to the ranch when the sky opened. Rain hammered down in sheets, turning the road to mud in minutes. Daisy, whom she'd finally learned to ride with some confidence, struggled against the wind. Thunder crashed overhead, and lightning illuminated the landscape in stark, terrifying flashes. By the time she reached the ranch, she was soaked through, shaking with cold and exhaustion. The usual creek crossing had become a raging torrent. There was no way back to town, no way to reach the separate quarters where she normally spent her nights. The main house loomed before her, offering the only shelter. Colt met her at the door, his face tight with concern. I was about to send someone looking for you. The creek. Her teeth chattered too hard to finish. I know. Come on, get inside. The warmth of the kitchen hit her like a wall. She stood dripping on the threshold, suddenly aware of how she must look, hair plastered to her head, dress clinging to every curve. I'll get a fire going in the parlor, Colt said. not quite meeting her eyes. "You need dry clothes." But what dry clothes? Everything she owned was in her room above the millinery shop in town, where she still kept quarters to maintain proprieties. Here at the ranch house, there was nothing but— "Catherine's things are still in the bedroom upstairs," Colt said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "Take whatever you need." He disappeared before she could respond. Emma climbed the stairs on unsteady legs, leaving wet footprints on the worn wood. She'd cleaned every room in the house except the master bedroom. That door had remained closed, a shrine she didn't dare disturb. Now she pushed it open, feeling like an intruder. The room was frozen in time, Catherine's brush still on the dresser, her robe hanging on a hook, the bed neatly made as if waiting for occupants who would never return. Emma opened the wardrobe with shaking hands, finding rows of dresses too fine for ranch life. At the bottom, folded neatly, were simpler things, nightgowns, shifts, a worn wrapper. She changed quickly, trying not to think about wearing a dead woman's clothes. The nightgown was too long, the wrapper too fine, but they were dry and warm. She toweled her hair as best she could, then ventured back downstairs. The parlor glowed with firelight. Colt had built the fire up to a roar and pulled 2 chairs close to the hearth. A bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses sat on the side table. He'd changed 2 clean shirt, dry pants, hair still damp from the rain. He looked up when she entered, and something flickered across his face. "Better." "Yes, thank you." She moved to the fire, supremely conscious of her state of undress. The wrapper covered her adequately, but she was still in nightclothes, in his house, alone with him. Everything about this broke the rules they'd so carefully maintained. "The storm's settling in for the night," he said, pouring whiskey into both glasses. "Creek won't be passable until morning, maybe longer." She accepted the glass gratefully, the liquor burning away the last of the chill. They sat in silence, watching the fire, while rain lashed the windows and wind howled around the eaves. "I should have sent someone with you to town," Colt said finally. "Knew there was weather coming. I've been taking care of myself for a long time." "I know, but you shouldn't have to." "Not anymore." He stared into his glass. "That's what this place is supposed to be somewhere. You don't have to fight so hard just to survive." "Is that why you offered me the job, to save me?" He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, maybe at first, that night at the Red Cactus, "You looked trapped, like a wild thing in a snare. I know what that feels like." "And now?" "Now," he looked at her directly for the first time since she'd come downstairs. "Now I can't imagine this place without you." The words hung between them, weightier than the storm outside. Emma set down her glass, her hands trembling for reasons that had nothing to do with cold. "Colt, I know." He stood abruptly, moving to the window. "I know all the reasons this is impossible. You work for me. The whole town already thinks—" He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. "And there's Catherine. You loved her." "I did do. It's complicated." He turned back to face her. "For 5 years, this house has been a tomb. I've been walking through the days like a ghost, just existing, not living. Then you came, and suddenly there's life here again. Bread in the oven, flowers on the table, laughter in the kitchen when you and Martha are working." Emma stood too, drawn by something she couldn't name. "I'm not her, Colt. I'll never be her. I don't want you to be—" The words came fierce and sudden. Catherine was sunshine bright and warm and easy to love. You're different. You're steel wrapped in silk, your strength disguised as softness. Your— Thunder crashed, drowning whatever he might have said next. The fire flickered, and in the shifting light, Emma made a decision. She crossed the space between them, stopping just close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. "The storm's not letting up." "No." "And I can't get back to town." "No." She looked up at him, her heart hammering. In the firelight, His eyes were dark as winter storms. "Where do I sleep tonight?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, like an invitation, like a precipice they stood on the edge of. Emma felt her cheeks burn, but she didn't look away. She'd asked the practical question, but they both heard the deeper one underneath. Colt's hand came up slowly, as if moving too fast might shatter the moment. His fingers brushed her cheek, tucking a strand of still damp hair behind her ear. "Emma, I'm not asking for promises," she said quickly. "I'm not asking for forever. I'm just asking—" She stopped, uncertain how to finish. "What are you asking?" She took a breath, summoning courage she'd used to survive saloons in suspicious towns and burning grasslands. "I'm asking where I belong tonight. In this storm, in this house." Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "With you." His hand curved around her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone. "You belong wherever you choose to be. That's what I've been trying to tell you since the day you arrived. You're not trapped here. You're not obligated. You're free to choose." "Then I choose to stay." He kissed her then, soft and careful, as if she might disappear. Emma had been grabbed and pawed at plenty in her years at the Red Cactus. But this was different. This was question and answer. Give and take, a conversation without words. When they parted, both were breathing unsteadily. "Emma, He stopped, started again. "I can offer you the spare room. It's clean, comfortable. You'd be safe there." "I know." She didn't move away. "Is that what you want?" "What I want and what's right aren't always the same thing. I know that too." She pulled back enough to see his face clearly. "But tonight, just tonight, can't we choose what we want?" He studied her for a long moment, and she saw the war in his eyes, duty against desire, past against present, ghost against flesh and blood. Then something shifted, settled. "You're sure?" Instead of answering, she took his hand and placed it over her heart, letting him feel how it raced. "I've been sure since the day you stood between me and Jake Morrison. Maybe before that. Maybe since the first time you looked at me and saw a person, not just another saloon girl." "You were never just anything." He pulled her closer, and this time when he kissed her, there was nothing careful about it. It was hunger and loneliness and too many nights of watching each other across careful distances. When they broke apart this time, Emma was dizzy with it. "So," she said, trying for lightness and failing entirely, "where do I sleep tonight?" He laughed, soft and surprised. "Wherever you want. The spare room's down the hall. My room's—" He gestured vaguely upstairs. "And if I don't want to sleep alone, if I'm tired of always being alone—" His arms tightened around her. "Then you don't have to be. Not tonight." They stood there while the storm raged outside. Two people who'd learned too young that safety was an illusion and happiness came dear. Neither moved toward the stairs. Toward decision. Toward consequences. For now. This moment was enough the fire warm beside them. The rain beating its rhythm on the roof. The simple miracle of not being alone. "I should tell you," Colt said against her hair. "I'm out of practice at this, at being with someone, at letting someone close." "So am I." She pulled back to look at him. "I know what people think, what they assume about girls who work in saloons, but I've always kept myself apart." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Emma, I'm not looking for rescue. I'm not looking for you to be noble. I'm just looking for something real. Something that's mine to choose." He cupped her face in both hands, and she saw Catherine's wedding ring still on his finger, saw the weight of all the ghosts between them, but she also saw the man lonely, honorable, trying so hard to do right that he'd forgotten how to live. "We take it slow," he said finally. "We take it careful. And tomorrow the creek will go down, and I'll go back to town, and we'll pretend this night didn't happen if that's what's needed." She covered his hands with hers. "But tonight?" Tonight you're here. We're here. Yes. He led her to the spare room first, showing her the clean sheets, the water pitcher, the extra blankets. Whatever you decide, he said. Whatever you need. She caught his hand as he turned to go. Stay, just for a while. We could talk, like normal people do. He smiled, and it transformed his face. I'd like that. They sat on the bed, backs against the headboard, and talked while the storm spent itself outside. He told her about meeting Catherine at a dance, about building the ranch up from nothing, about the baby who'd lived just long enough to take one breath. She told him about her father's drinking, her mother's death, the long string of towns and jobs that had led her to the red cactus. Somewhere in the telling, she ended up curled against his side, his arm around her shoulders. It felt natural. Right, like coming home after a long journey. I should go, he said eventually. Let you sleep. Should you? He looked down at her, and she saw the exact moment his resolve crumbled. No, I shouldn't. What followed was gentle and careful and achingly sweet. Two lonely people finding comfort in each other while the storm raged outside. They didn't speak of love, it was too soon, too complicated for that. But in the darkness, with rain drumming on the roof and thunder rolling across the range, they found something else. Connection, warmth, the simple human comfort of skin against skin and hearts beating in rhythm. When dawn broke gray and watery, they were still entwined. Emma's head on Colt's chest, his fingers tangled in her hair. She woke first, studying his face in the pale light. Asleep. He looked younger. The harsh lines softened. No regrets, he asked without opening his eyes. No regrets. She traced a pattern on his chest. You. He caught her hand, brought it to his lips. None. Except now I know what I've been missing. Now I know what it feels like to wake up not alone. He opened his eyes, and they were sad. That might be harder to live with than the loneliness. She understood. Tonight had been stolen time, a gift from the storm. Today reality would intrude. The creek would recede. She'd return to town. They'd rebuild their careful boundaries. But for now, for just a little longer, they had the warm cocoon of blankets, the gray light filtering through curtains, the sound of rain still pattering on the windows. Where do I sleep tonight? She asked softly, echoing her question from the night before. He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Wherever you want. Emma Ward. Always wherever you want. Outside, the storm was breaking, but inside, in the spare room of a ranch house that had seen too much sorrow, two people held each other and pretended that morning would never come. The gunshots came at dawn, two sharp cracks that echoed across Dry Creek like thunder. Emma jerked awake in her room above the millinery shop, her heart pounding. In the week since the storm, since that night she and Colt had carefully not discussed. She'd returned to maintaining proper appearances, but gunfire at dawn never meant anything good. By the time she dressed and reached the street, a crowd had gathered outside the Silver Spur. Sheriff Harlow stood at the saloon's entrance, his face grim. Nobody goes in, he commanded. This is a crime scene now. What happened? Emma pushed through the crowd, dread settling in her stomach like lead. The sheriff's eyes found her, and something in his expression made her blood run cold. Luther Pike's dead, shot twice in the chest in his own office. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Then someone shouted, "Where's Harlan? Him and Pike been feuding since that fire." Already sent men to bring him in, Harlow said heavily. Found evidence at the scene. Emma's world tilted. What evidence? But the sheriff had already turned away, directing his deputies. The crowd pressed closer, voices rising, speculation running wild. Emma backed away, her mind racing. She needed to get to the ranch, needed to warn Miss Ward. Frank Dooley materialized at her elbow, his breath sour with whiskey despite the early hour. Terrible business. Ain't it, specially considering? Considering what? His smile was oily. Well, everyone knows the boss has been sweet on you. And Pike, he's been spreading stories about you two. Man might do anything to protect a woman's honor. Emma wanted to slap the knowing look off his face, but she forced herself to remain calm. Mr. Harlan would never— Course not. Frank's tone suggested otherwise. Still, might want to distance yourself. Things are about to get ugly. He sauntered off, leaving Emma standing in the street as the crowd dispersed. She needed information, needed to understand what had happened, making a decision. She headed for the Silver Spur's back entrance. The alley reeked of garbage and stale beer. Emma slipped through the shadows, avoiding puddles of questionable origin. The back door stood ajar, careless of the deputies, but lucky for her, Pike's office was on the second floor. Emma climbed the narrow stairs, her feet silent on the worn wood. Voices drifted from the main room where the body had been found, but the hallway was empty. She found what she was looking for in a storage room, a window overlooking Pike's office. Through the glass, she could see the scene: Pike slumped over his desk, blood pooling on the expensive carpet. The office door was intact, a key still in the lock from the inside. Locked door, she murmured. How did the killer get out? Good question. Emma spun to find Tom's wife, Sarah, holding a mop and bucket. The woman's dark eyes were steady, unafraid. Sarah, I was thinking the same thing you are. Sarah set down her supplies. They hire us colored folk to clean up their messes, but they forget we got eyes and ears. That door was locked from inside when they found him. But look, she pointed to the window. See them scratches on the sill? Fresh ones. Emma looked closer. Sure enough, new gouges marked the wood around the lock mechanism. Someone jimmied it from outside. Emma breathed. After Pike was already dead. To make it look like suicide, maybe, or like whoever did it had a key. Sarah's expression was grim. Found something else, too. You know that work glove they're saying is Mr. Harlan's, the one with his ranch brand burned in the leather? Emma nodded, her heart sinking. Saw Frank Dooley wearing a pair just like them 3 days ago, borrowing from the boss. He said— The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Where would Frank get a key to Pike's office? Same place he got the money for all that whiskey he's been drinking. Same place he got the idea to cut them fences before the fire. Sarah's voice dropped. I clean here twice a week. Seen Frank coming and going from Mr. Pike's office when he thought no one was watching. Footsteps on the stairs sent them both into motion. Sarah grabbed her mop, becoming invisible the way servants did. Emma ducked behind a stack of crates as 2 deputies passed, discussing evidence. Gun matches Harlan's caliber. Gloves definitely his. Got the brand and everything. Bad blood over that cattle business. They moved on, and Emma emerged from hiding. Sarah was already heading for the stairs. You best get scarce. Miss Emma, they find you here. It'll look worse for Mr. Harlan. Emma caught her arm. Would you testify about what you saw? Sarah's smile was sad. Colored woman's word against a white man's. You know how that goes, but you find other proof. I'll speak up. Mr. Harlan's been decent to Tom and me. We don't forget that. Emma made her way back to the street, her mind churning. She needed evidence, needed proof that would hold up in court. But where to start? The answer came from an unexpected source. As she passed the general store, Samuel beckoned her inside. Miss Ward, thought you should know sold Frank Dooley 2 boxes of .45 cartridges last week. Same caliber as what killed Pike. Seemed odd. Him buying ammunition when the ranch orders in bulk. Did he say why? Something about target practice. Samuel leaned closer. But here's the interesting part: he paid with a $20 gold piece. Fresh minted. Don't see many of those around here. $20. A month's wages for a ranch hand. Emma filed the information away, thanked Samuel, and hurried on. She needed to get to the ranch accounts. Needed to check. Emma? She turned to see Colt being marched down the street between two deputies. His hands cuffed in front of him. Their eyes met across the crowd, and she saw no fear in his face, only a weary resignation. "Don't," he said quietly as she started toward him. "Not here. Not now." Sheriff Harlow stepped between them. "Miss Ward, I'll need to ask you some questions later about Mr. Harlan's whereabouts last night." "He was at the ranch all night." The lie came easily, though in truth she had no idea where Colt had been. They'd barely spoken since the storm. "Can anyone verify that?" "The whole bunkhouse. Except Frank Dooley says the boss rode out around midnight. Didn't come back till near dawn." Emma's heart sank, but she kept her face neutral. "Frank's mistaken." "Maybe so." The sheriff's eyes were kind but firm. "But a man's dead, and I got to follow the evidence. Don't leave town, Miss Ward." They marched Colt away, and Emma stood frozen until Martha appeared at her side. "Come on, child. Standing here won't help him." "Martha, I have to—" "What you have to do is be smart. They're watching you now, waiting for you to do something foolish." Martha steered her toward the boarding house. "But that don't mean we can't do something clever instead." Safe in Emma's room, Martha revealed what she knew. "Been keeping an eye on Frank since the fire. That man's been spending money like water-new boots. Rounds of drinks at the Silver Dollar. Even saw him at that fancy cat house on the far side of town. Pike was paying him. But for what? Just information? Maybe, or maybe for something worse." Martha pulled out a small ledger. "Been doing some bookkeeping for the Silver Dollar on the side. Look at this regular payments to FED. Going back 2 months, but they stopped last week." Emma studied the entries. Right after the fire, after Colt refused to make a fuss about the stolen cattle, Pike expected a fight. When he didn't get one, he didn't need Frank anymore. Emma stood, pacing. So Frank decided to collect one last payment, but something went wrong. Or went exactly right. If his plan was to frame Mr. Harlan, a knock at the door interrupted them. Emma opened it cautiously to find Tom holding his hat. "Miss Emma, got something you need to see, but we got to hurry." They followed him through back streets to a ramshackle barn on the edge of town. Inside, hidden under a pile of hay, was a saddlebag. "Found this in Frank's quarters at the ranch," Tom explained. "Figured I'd better grab it before the sheriff's men came searching." Emma opened the bag with trembling fingers. Inside a wad of $20 gold pieces, a silver flask engraved with Pike's initials, and, most damning of all, a letter in Pike's handwriting. Deal's off. Harlan won't bite. No more payments. Keep your mouth shut about our arrangement. L.P. "This is it," Emma breathed. "This proves Frank was working for Pike. Proves motive, too," Martha added. "Man don't take kindly to being cut off from easy money." But Tom shook his head. "Still don't explain how Frank got in and out of that locked room, or why Pike would let him in at all, knowing he'd been cut off." Emma considered. Unless Pike didn't let him in, unless Frank had his own key, how would he— Martha stopped. The payment ledger, F, wasn't the only initials getting regular payments. There was also M.S. Mary Sullivan. Tom supplied. Pike's cleaning woman. She's got keys to everything. Emma's mind raced. "We need to talk to her. Tom, can you—" "Already on it." Tom settled his hat. "You two get this evidence somewhere safe. I'll find Mary." An hour later, they reconvened in Martha's kitchen. Mary Sullivan, a nervous woman in her 50s, clutched a handkerchief with shaking hands. "I didn't know what he wanted them for," she insisted. "Frank said Mr. Pike needed copies made, that's all. Paid me $5 to borrow the keys for an hour." "When was this?" Emma asked gently. 3 weeks back, right before that big fire. Mary twisted the handkerchief. I needed the money. My boy's sick, and medicine's dear. We're not blaming you, Martha assured her. But would you tell the sheriff what you just told us? Mary nodded miserably. Mr. Pike was a hard man, but he didn't deserve murder, and Mr. Harlan's always been decent. If Frank did this... Emma stood. We need to move fast. The sheriff's probably preparing charges against Colt right now. But as they gathered the evidence, one question nagged at Emma. Why frame Colt Frank could have made it look like suicide or robbery? Why go to the trouble of planting evidence? Because, a familiar voice said from the doorway, dead men tell no tales, but imprisoned men can't fight back. Sheriff Harlow stood there, his expression thoughtful. Been doing some investigating of my own. Miss Ward, seems Frank Dooley's been buying up water rights along the creek, small parcels. Nothing dramatic. But if Harlan goes to prison and the ranch fails, Frank positions himself to buy it cheap. Emma finished. With Pike's money he stole after killing him. That's a fine theory, but I need proof for a jury. Emma handed him the saddlebag. The ledger. The letter. Watched his eyes widen as he examined each piece. Mary Sullivan's willing to testify about the keys, Martha added. And Sarah Tom's wife saw Frank wearing them work gloves, the ones you found at the scene. The sheriff was quiet for a long moment. Then, Frank's at the ranch. Was supposed to stay in town, but he rode out an hour ago. If he realizes we're onto him, he'll run. Emma grabbed her shawl. We need to get there before... We nothing. I'm the law here. But Harlow was already moving, though I wouldn't object to responsible citizens following at a safe distance. The ride to the ranch had never seemed longer. Emma pushed Daisy hard, Martha and Tom flanking her, the sheriff and his deputies ahead. The sun was setting by the time they crested the final ridge, painting the sky red as blood. They were too late. The barn was ablaze, flames leaping into the darkening sky. Men ran everywhere, bucket brigade forming. But Emma's eyes went to the confrontation by the corral. Frank Dooley stood with a gun trained on 3 ranch hands, his horse saddled and ready behind him. Nobody moves till I'm clear, Frank shouted. I got nothing to lose now. Sheriff Harlow and his men spread out, but Frank had good cover. Any approach would give him a clear shot. Frank, Emma called out before anyone could stop her. It's over. We know about Pike, about the keys, about everything. Frank's laugh was bitter. Should have minded your own business, girl. Just like you should have stayed at the Red Cactus where you belonged. Maybe, but I didn't, and neither did you. You could have stayed a ranch hand, earned honest wages. Instead, you got greedy. Greedy, Frank's voice rose. I worked this land for 15 years, broke my back while Harlan sat pretty in his big house. Pike understood that. Pike was going to make me rich. Pike used you, then threw you away. Emma took a step closer, aware of the sheriff moving to flank Frank. Just like he used everyone. Shut up! The gun swung toward her. One more step and... The shot came from behind Frank. He spun, firing wild, as Colt emerged from the burning barn. Rifle in hand, the foreman's bullet went wide. But Colt's didn't. Frank crumpled, clutching his shoulder. Gun falling from nerveless fingers. In seconds, the deputies had him surrounded. Sheriff Harlow kicked the gun away, nodding to his men. Get him patched up. He's got a date with the judge. Colt lowered his rifle, swaying on his feet. That's when Emma saw the blood on his shirt, the way he favored his left side. You're hurt. Frank got lucky when I surprised him in the barn. He managed a weak smile. Worth it to hear him confessing to Pike's murder. Sheriff heard it all too. Then his knees buckled. Emma caught him as he fell, easing him to the ground. Around them, men battled the barn fire, but she had eyes only for the spreading red stain on his shirt. Don't you dare, she said fiercely. Don't you dare die on me now. Not when we just cleared your name." His hand found hers, grip still strong. "Not planning on it. Too much to live for now." Sheriff Harlow knelt beside them. "Doc's on his way. Frank's singing like a bird, admitting to everything. Pike's murder, the fence cutting, planning to burn the ranch records to cover his tracks." "The barn," Colt tried to rise. "Just the barn," Tom assured him, appearing with medical supplies. "We got the horses out, and the important papers are in the house. Let it burn. We'll build a better one." As the doctor arrived and began working on Colt's wound, a graze, painful but not fatal, Emma found herself surrounded by friends. Martha, Tom, Sarah, even Krusty Cookie, all standing guard while the barn burned and Frank was hauled away. "You did good, child," Martha said quietly. "Proved what kind of woman you really are." Emma watched the doctor bandage Colt's ribs, felt his hand still holding hers. "I had help, all of you." "That's what family does," Tom said simply. "And that's what we are now. All of us, family." The barn collapsed in a shower of sparks, but nobody moved to fight it anymore. Let it burn, Emma thought. Let the old burn away to make room for the new. Tomorrow they'd face the town, the gossip, the speculation about her and Colt. Tomorrow they'd rebuild. But tonight, surrounded by the family she'd chosen and who'd chosen her, with Colt's hand warm in hers and justice finally served, Emma Ward allowed herself to believe in tomorrow for the first time in years. The locked door had been opened. The truth had set them all free. The first wedding took place on a crisp December morning at Dry Creek's only church. Emma stood before the altar in a borrowed dress, pale blue silk that Martha had altered to fit, trying not to fidget under the weight of so many stairs. Half the town had packed into the small wooden building, drawn by scandal and spectacle in equal measure. Reverend Michaels cleared his throat, his disapproval evident in every line of his weathered face. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Colt Harlan and Emma Ward." Emma barely heard the words. She was too aware of the whispers rustling through the congregation like wind through dry leaves. In the front row, Mrs. Ashford sat with her lips pursed so tight they disappeared entirely. Behind her, the church ladies clutched their prayer books like weapons. Colt's hand found hers, steady and warm. He looked magnificent in his black suit, though she could see the tension in his jaw, the way his eyes kept scanning the crowd as if expecting trouble. The wound from Frank's bullet had healed, leaving only a faint scar. But Emma knew the deeper wounds, the ones inflicted by gossip and judgment, cut deeper. "If anyone here has just cause why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace." The silence stretched taut as piano wire. Emma held her breath, waiting for someone to stand, to voice what half the room was thinking. Former saloon girl, lived under his roof unmarried, no better than she should be. But the moment passed, and Reverend Michaels continued, his tone making it clear he was performing this ceremony under protest. The vows were exchanged quickly, efficiently, as if he couldn't wait to wash his hands of the whole affair. "You may kiss your bride." Colt's kiss was brief, proper, suitable for public viewing, but his eyes held promises of something more, something that made warmth bloom in Emma's chest, despite the cold reception surrounding them. They signed the register, Martha and Sheriff Harlow serving as witnesses, two of the few who'd stood by them without reservation. Then came the walk back down the aisle, past the judging faces and pursed lips, out into the harsh December sunlight. "Well," Colt said once they were in the wagon, "that was about as pleasant as a hanging." Emma laughed, surprising herself. "Did you see Mrs. Ashford's face? I thought she might swallow her own tongue." Let them choke on their disapproval. But there was hurt under his bravado. This town had been his home all his life. Their rejection stung. "The ranch is ready?" she asked, changing the subject. "Tom and Sarah have been working since dawn. Martha, too." He guided the horses around a pothole, Cookie threatened to bake a cake. I told him we'd take our chances with Martha's instead. The second wedding began the moment they crested the hill overlooking the ranch. Emma gasped, her hand flying to her throat. The yard had been transformed. Lanterns hung from every post and tree, glowing warm against the winter afternoon. Tables groaned under the weight of food, not the delicate finger sandwiches of a town social, but real food: barbecued beef, cornbread, beans, pies, and yes, a towering cake that had Martha's handiwork written all over it. And the people, Emma had expected the ranch hands, maybe Tom and Sarah, Martha and Cookie, but the yard was full. Samuel from the general store raised a glass in greeting. The doctor who'd tended Colt's wound, several small ranchers from the outlying areas, even some of the Mexican vaqueros from across the border, men who knew what it was like to be looked down upon. "Welcome home, Mrs. Harlan," Tom called out, and suddenly everyone was cheering, raising glasses, calling congratulations. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "Colt, this is our real wedding," he said softly. "The one that matters." They climbed down from the wagon to be immediately engulfed. Martha swept Emma into a hug that threatened to crack ribs. "Now don't you start crying and ruin that pretty face. Save the tears for later when Cookie tries to make a speech." "I heard that," Cookie protested, but he was grinning. Tom produced his guitar, and music filled the air. Not the stiff hymns of the church, but real music, folk songs, and frontier ballads that had people tapping their feet and swaying. "Dance with your wife, boss," someone called. Colt held out his hand, formal as any gentleman. "Mrs. Harlan, would you do me the honor?" They danced there in the dusty yard, surrounded by friends who'd chosen to celebrate rather than condemn. Emma had learned the steps years ago in a very different life, but here, in Colt's arms, they felt new. He was a good dancer, moving with the same easy grace he showed in the saddle. "Where did you learn to dance like this?" she asked. "Catherine taught me." There was no pain in the mention now, just fond memory. She said a man who couldn't dance was only half a husband. She was a wise woman. I think she would have liked you. He spun her out and back. You both have that same strength, that same way of making a house feel like home. Others joined them on the makeshift dance floor. Tom whirled Sarah around while she laughed. Martha danced with the doctor, both of them red-faced and merry. Even Sheriff Harlow had been convinced to partner with Tom's eldest daughter. As the sun began to sink, casting long shadows across the ranch, Colt pulled Emma aside. "I have something for you." He led her to the small office where he kept the ranch records. On the desk lay a leather portfolio. Emma opened it, confused, then gasped. Legal documents, bank papers, all in her name. "I don't understand." "Your own account, your own money." He watched her carefully. "Part of the ranch profits will go directly to you. Not pin money, not household expenses, yours." Emma sank into a chair, overwhelmed. "Colt, women don't—" "My wife does. You'll never be trapped again. Emma, never dependent on anyone's goodwill, not even mine. You'll always have choices." She stood slowly, the magnitude of the gift stealing her breath. Not just money freedom, security, the right to leave if she chose, to stay because she wanted to, not because she had to. "I love you," she said, the words coming unbidden but absolutely true. His face transformed, years falling away. "Say it again." "I love you, Colt Harlan. Not for this," she gestured at the papers. "Though Lord knows it means more than you can imagine. I love you for seeing me, for defending me, for giving me a home and a purpose and a reason to believe in tomorrow." He kissed her then, and it was nothing like the church kiss. This was fire and promise and a hunger too long denied. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "We should get back," Emma said reluctantly. "People will talk." "Let them. They're going to anyway." But he let her lead him back to the party, where the celebration had taken on a life of its own. As full dark fell, someone started a bonfire. The flames leaped high, casting dancing shadows, turning faces golden. Stories began, tall tales and true ones, memories of cattle drives and storms weathered, of loves lost and found. "Speech," someone called. "Let's hear from the groom." Colt stood, pulling Emma up beside him. The crowd quieted, expectant. "I'm not much for speeches," he began, and got a chorus of good-natured ribbing. "But I reckon this day calls for one. 5 years ago, I thought my life was over. Thought I'd spend the rest of my days going through the motions, keeping the ranch running out of duty, not love." His hand found Emma's. "Then this woman walked into my life. Or maybe I should say, I walked into hers, throwing punches in a saloon like some young buck with more pride than sense." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Those who'd heard about that night and who hadn't nodded knowingly. Emma Ward, Emma Harlan. Now she saved more than just this ranch. She saved me, brought life back to a dead house, brought laughter back to these old walls. And when trouble came, when Frank Dooley tried to destroy everything we'd built, she stood tall and fought back with more courage than most men I've known. He turned to face her fully. "I know what they're saying in town. I know what they think. But I also know what I see when I look at you. I see strength disguised as gentleness. I see wisdom earned through hardship. I see the woman who'll stand beside me through whatever comes next. Not because she has to, but because she chooses to." He raised his glass. "To Emma Harlan, my wife, my partner, my home." The cheer that went up could probably be heard in town. Emma found herself laughing and crying at the same time as people surged forward to offer congratulations again. But the most meaningful moment came later, as the party wound down. A buggy approached through the darkness, and Emma tensed. Late arrivals to a wedding rarely meant good news. A woman climbed down, elegant even in traveling clothes. Emma recognized her from the portrait in the parlor, the same eyes, the same graceful bearing. "Margaret," Colt said, surprise evident. "Catherine's sister," he explained to Emma. Margaret approached slowly, her expression unreadable. She studied Emma for a long moment, taking in everything from the simple wedding dress to the work-calloused hands. "So you're the woman who's caused such a scandal," Margaret said finally. Emma lifted her chin. "I am." "Good." Margaret smiled suddenly, transforming her severe features. "This place needed a scandal. Colt's been sleepwalking for too long." She turned to her former brother-in-law. "Catherine would be furious with you. You know, not for remarrying, she'd have wanted that, but for letting those hypocrites in town make you both run a gauntlet on what should be a joyful day." Margaret Colt began, but she waved him off. "I didn't come for the town wedding. Wouldn't give those biddies the satisfaction. I came for this one, the real one." She looked around at the lanterns, the music, the mixed gathering of ranch hands and townspeople, Anglo and Mexican, all celebrating together. This is what Catherine would have wanted. Life, joy, people who judge by character, not by gossip. She reached into her bag, pulling out a small wrapped package. "Your wedding gift. It was Catherine's, her grandmother's, before that. She would have wanted the next Mrs. Harlan to have it." Emma opened the package with trembling fingers. Inside lay a delicate gold locket on a fine chain. "It opens," Margaret said softly. Inside were 2 tiny photographs, one of Catherine, one empty. "For your own memories," Margaret explained. "The past and the future, carried close to your heart." Emma felt tears threaten again. "I don't know what to say. Say you'll be happy. Say you'll fill this house with laughter and children and noise. Say you'll make my sister's sacrifice mean something by living the life she couldn't." "I promise," Emma whispered. Margaret nodded, satisfied. "Then I'll stay the night and head back to Austin tomorrow. But I expect regular letters. and I want to meet my future nieces and nephews." The party gradually dispersed, people drifting away with warm farewells and promises to visit. Tom and Sarah were among the last to leave, Sarah pressing a small quilt into Emma's hands. "For your first baby," she whispered with a wink. Finally, it was just Emma and Colt standing in the yard, surrounded by the debris of celebration. The moon had risen full and bright, turning the ranch silver in shadow. 2 weddings in one day. Emma mused. Is that legal? The first was legal. This one was real. He pulled her close. "Do you regret any of it?" Emma thought of the cold church, the harsh whispers, the turned backs. Then she thought of this friends who'd driven miles to celebrate, Margaret's unexpected blessing, the legal papers that guaranteed her independence even as she chose dependence. "No regrets," she said firmly. "Not one." They walked hand in hand toward the house, their house now, truly and completely. Behind them, the dying bonfire sent sparks dancing into the night sky like wishes taking flight. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be those in town who'd never accept her, never forgive Colt for choosing a former saloon girl over propriety. But there would also be mornings waking up next to the man she loved, evenings on the porch watching the sun paint the mountains gold, the satisfaction of building something lasting together. As they reached the door, Colt swept her up into his arms, making her laugh with surprise. "Tradition," he said, grinning. "Got to do something proper today." He carried her over the threshold, and Emma thought about all the times she'd crossed this doorway as a desperate woman fleeing the saloon, as a housekeeper trying to earn honest wages, as a fighter defending her home, and now as a wife. Each crossing had changed her, shaped her, brought her closer to this moment, and as Colt set her gently on her feet in the home they'd build together, Emma knew that the best crossings were yet to come. 2 weddings, one for the law, one for the heart. And in the end, the heart was all that truly mattered. The drought came in March, earlier than anyone expected. By April, the grass crackled underfoot like old paper, and the creek ran so low you could step across it without wetting your boots. Emma stood on the porch, one hand pressed to her still flat belly, watching dust devils dance across the barren pasture. "Thinking hard thoughts won't bring rain," Martha said, joining her with 2 glasses of cool water. "Though Lord knows we could use some." Emma accepted the water gratefully. The news of her pregnancy had come just as the drought settled in, as if the land and her body had conspired to test her resilience simultaneously. "Colt's worried. He won't say it, but I can see it in his eyes." "Course he's worried. Man's got a ranch to run, cattle to water, and a baby on the way. That's enough to furrow any brow." Martha studied her shrewdly. "You told him yet?" "Tonight, I wanted to be sure first." "Child, you've been green every morning for 2 weeks and can't stand the smell of coffee. If that ain't sure, I don't know what is." Emma smiled despite her concerns. It was true the signs were unmistakable. She'd known in her heart for days but had held the secret close, savoring it like cool water in this parched time. The sound of approaching horses drew their attention. Colt rode in with Tom and 2 other hands, their faces grim beneath the dust. "Lost another 10 head, Colt said without preamble as he dismounted. "Found them by the dry wash. Heat got 'em." Emma's heart sank. That made 30 this month alone. At this rate, they'd lose half the herd before summer's end. "Maybe it's time to consider Hartwell's offer," Tom suggested carefully. "He's still willing to buy the southern section." "No." Colt's voice was flat. "We don't sell land. We weather it out." But Emma heard the doubt underneath the determination. James Hartwell had approached them twice now, offering good money for the section that bordered his property. It included the best remaining water, a natural spring that hadn't dried up yet. Selling would bring immediate relief but would cripple the ranch's future. That evening, as they sat down to a simple supper, Emma gathered her courage. "Colt, I have something to tell you." He looked up from the ledgers he'd been studying, red-rimmed eyes focusing on her with concern. "What is it?" "We're going to have a baby." The transformation of his face was worth all her nervous waiting. Joy, wonder, and yes, fear flickered across his features in quick succession. "A baby," he repeated softly. Then he was around the table, pulling her into his arms. "When?" "November, near as Martha and I can figure." He held her tight, and she felt him tremble slightly. "Emma, He pulled back to look at her. "Are you well? Do you need—" "I'm fine. We're fine." She touched his face. "This is good news, Colt." "The best." But she saw the worry creep back in. "Just wish it was coming at a better time." "With the drought and the cattle losses?" "We'll manage. We always do." He kissed her then, soft and sweet. But when they parted, his eyes strayed back to the ledgers. Emma understood. A baby meant another mouth to feed, another life depending on the ranch's survival. The joy was real, but so was the burden. The drought deepened as spring gave way to summer. The spring on the southern section kept flowing, but barely. Cattle crowded around it, churning the ground to mud, fighting for position. Tempers frayed as short as the grass. Emma threw herself into learning the business side of ranching with new urgency. She negotiated with suppliers, found creative ways to stretch their resources, and even arranged to sell eggs and vegetables in town to bring in extra money. The ladies who'd snubbed her at church now grudgingly bought her produce. Good food was good food, whatever the source. One blistering July afternoon, she was returning from town when she saw smoke on the horizon. Not the black smoke of grass fire, but gray-white plumes rising from multiple points. Racing home, she found organized chaos. Colt and the hands were setting backfires along the eastern boundary, trying to create a firebreak. "Lightning strike," Colt explained tersely when she found him. "Hit the Hartwell place. Wind's pushing it our way." Emma didn't hesitate, despite her growing belly. She joined the bucket brigade, soaking blankets and beating at spot fires. Sarah worked beside her, both women determined to save what they could. The fire raged for hours, jumping the creek in 2 places, consuming precious grass and threatening the outbuildings. But the firebreak held, and by sunset, the danger had passed, the cost another 100 acres of pasture gone, feed that couldn't be spared. That night, as Emma tended Colt's singed hands, they faced hard truths. "We can't take another hit like this," he said quietly. "Lost too much grass, too many cattle. If we don't get rain soon—" "What are you saying?" "Hartwell approached Tom today, upped his offer by 20%. Colt's jaw clenched. "It would see us through. Give us capital to rebuild the herd when the drought breaks." Emma set down the salve, thinking hard. "Show me the maps." They spread the ranch surveys across the kitchen table. The southern section comprised nearly a quarter of their land, including the precious spring. Selling it would solve immediate problems but create long-term ones. "What if," Emma said slowly, "we didn't sell? What if we leased it instead?" Colt frowned. "Lease?" "Water and grazing rights. Say for 2 years. Hartwell gets what he needs now. We get income without losing ownership. When the drought breaks, we get our land back." Colt studied the maps with new interest. He might go for that. His wells are running dry too. It took a week of negotiations, but they struck a deal. The lease money would see them through the drought, and Hartwell agreed to share the cost of drilling a new well on the northern section. Emma handled the paperwork, discovering a talent for legal language that surprised everyone, including herself. August brought no rain, but did bring an unexpected visitor. Margaret arrived unannounced, her buggy loaded with supplies. "Figured you could use some help," she said simply, surveying Emma's expanding waistline with approval. "Besides, Austin's too hot. At least here you get a breeze sometimes." Her presence was a blessing. Margaret took over many household duties, freeing Emma to continue her work with the accounts and negotiations. She also brought news from Austin market prices, political changes, innovations in ranching that might help. "You know," Margaret said one evening as they worked on baby clothes, "Catherine would be proud. The way you've handled this drought, the way you've stood by Colt, it's exactly what she would have done." "I doubt she would have been negotiating with merchants while 6 months pregnant." Emma replied wryly, "You didn't know her when she was expecting. Woman was a force of nature. Rode horses until the week before." Margaret broke off, her face clouding. Emma reached over, squeezing her hand. They'd become close these past weeks, united by their love for this place and the people in it. September arrived with clouds that built each afternoon but dropped no rain. The cattle were skeletal, the grass gone, everyone living on hope and stubbornness. Then, on a still morning when the air felt heavy as wet wool, Emma woke to a strange sound. Thunder! Real thunder, not the dry rumble of heat lightning. She shook Colt awake, and together they stood on the porch watching clouds build dark, heavy, beautiful clouds. The first drops fell at noon, fat, warm drops that sent everyone running outside. Faces turned skyward. Then the sky opened, and rain poured down in sheets. Rain. The cry went up from the bunkhouse. Cowboys danced in the yard, hats off, letting the water stream down their faces. Emma laughed, crying at the same time, while Colt held her close under the shelter of the porch. It rained for 3 days. Not the violent cloudburst that caused floods, but steady, soaking rain that the earth drank greedily. The creek rose, the grass began to green, and hope returned to the Harlan Ranch. But the drought had taken its toll. They'd lost nearly half the herd, and recovering would take years. Still, they'd survived when other ranches hadn't. The Jameson place stood empty, foreclosed. 2 smaller spreads had been bought out by Hartwell, who'd grown fat on others' misfortunes. "We held on," Colt said one evening as they watched the sunset paint the rain-washed hills gold. "That's what matters." Emma, now heavily pregnant, leaned against him. "We did more than hold on. We adapted. We found new ways to survive." "You found new ways," he corrected. "The leasing idea, the vegetable business, the deal with the freight company to use our corrals, that was all you. And the decision not to panic, sell the determination to weather it out. That was you." She took his hand, placing it on her belly where the baby kicked strongly. "We make a good team, Mr. Harlan." The best Mrs. Harlan. October brought more rain and the return of neighboring ranchers looking to rebuild. The community that had weathered the drought together was stronger for it. Even some of the town ladies who'd snubbed Emma now nodded respectfully when she passed. Surviving hardship had a way of rearranging social priorities. One crisp morning, Emma was working in her kitchen garden, much expanded now, and a source of pride when pain lanced through her middle. She gripped the fence, breathing hard. As Sarah rushed to her side, "Time?" Sarah asked. Emma nodded, unable to speak through the contraction. What followed was 12 hours of labor that tested Emma's endurance more than any drought or fire. Colt paced outside, driving everyone half mad with worry, while Martha and Sarah attended her with the doctor. "Push," Martha commanded. "I know it hurts, child, but push." Emma bore down, drawing on reserves of strength she'd built through months of hardship. And then, as dawn broke over the rain-green hills, a cry split the air. "A girl," the doctor announced. "A fine, healthy girl." Colt was beside her instantly, tears streaming down his weathered face as the baby was placed in Emma's arms. Perfect tiny fingers, a shock of dark hair, and eyes that seemed to hold all the wisdom of the ages. "Hope," Emma whispered. "Her name is Hope. Hope Harlan." Colt agreed, touching the baby's cheek with one gentle finger. "Born after the drought, proof that we can weather anything." Margaret, who'd stayed for the birth, smiled through her own tears. "Catherine Hope Harlan," she suggested softly, "for the past and the future." Emma looked at Colt, who nodded. "Catherine Hope Harlan." She agreed, a name with history and promise. As the household settled into the rhythm of new life, baby cries at midnight, the sweet smell of milk, the wonder of first smiles, Emma reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From saloon girl to ranch wife, from drought to plenty, from solitude to family. The challenges weren't over. Rebuilding the herd would take time and money. The lease with Hartwell would end eventually, requiring new negotiations. There would be other droughts, other fires, other tests of their resilience. But now they had hope, literal and figurative. They had each other, tested by hardship and proven strong. They had the respect earned through perseverance and the community forged in shared struggle. One evening, as Emma nursed Hope on the porch while Colt tallied the growing herd, Tom rode up with news. "Hartwell's asking about extending the lease," he reported. "Says he's impressed with how you've managed the land. Wants to talk about a partnership. Maybe shared water rights, cooperative grazing." Colt looked at Emma, eyebrow raised. She shifted Hope to her other arm. "Considering, tell him we'll meet next week. I'll draw up some preliminary terms." She smiled. "Partnership means equals. If he can accept that, we might have something to discuss." Tom tipped his hat, grinning. "Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Harlan, I'll tell him you'll be doing the negotiating." As Tom rode off, Colt reached over to take Emma's free hand. "My wife, the businesswoman. Your wife, the survivor," she corrected. "We both are, all three of us now." Hope gurgled contentedly, and overhead, clouds gathered, not the threatening clouds of drought or storm, but the gentle ones that promised more rain, more growth, more life. The seasons would turn, bringing fire and rain in their measure, but the Harlan Ranch would endure, built on love, strengthened by adversity, and blessed with hope. 1 year later, the Harlan Ranch sprawled beneath an October sun that painted everything gold. Emma stood in the vegetable garden, Hope balanced on her hip, watching Colt and the hands raise the frame of a new barn. The sound of hammers rang across the valley like church bells, each strike a declaration of progress. "Look, sweetheart," Emma murmured to her daughter. "Papa's building our future." Hope gurgled and reached for her mother's hair, now pinned up properly but always threatening to escape. At nearly a year old, she had her father's serious eyes and her mother's determined chin. She was also, as Martha frequently declared, the smilingest baby in Texas. "Emma," Sarah called from the kitchen door. "Letter from Margaret." Emma shifted Hope to her other hip and made her way to the house. The kitchen, once a bachelor's wasteland, now gleamed with copper pots and fresh curtains. Herbs dried from the rafters, and the smell of baking bread filled the air. This was what home smelled like: yeast and sage and possibility. Sarah handed her the letter, then reached for Hope. "Come here, little miss. Let your mama read in peace." Emma broke the seal, scanning Margaret's neat handwriting. Her sister-in-law wrote regularly, but this letter carried unexpected news. "Dear Emma, I hope this letter finds you all in good health. I write with news that may surprise you. I am engaged to be married. His name is William Thornberry, a banker here in Austin, and a finer man I've never met. He reminds me of Colt in his steadiness, though thankfully with less tendency toward stubbornness. Which brings me to my purpose. We plan to wed at Christmas, and I would very much like the ceremony to be at the ranch. I know it's a great deal to ask, but Catherine always said the ranch was where hearts found their true home. I believe she was right. William is eager to meet you all and to see the place that has figured so prominently in my letters. He says any woman who can turn a drought into a business opportunity is someone he needs to know. All my love, Margaret." Emma set down the letter, mind already racing with plans. A Christmas wedding at the ranch, it would be perfect. The new barn would be finished. The house was in fine shape, and it would give the community another reason to see how far they'd all come. "Good news?" Sarah asked, bouncing Hope on her knee. "The best. Margaret's getting married. Wants to have the wedding here." Sarah's face lit up. "A wedding? Oh, Miss Emma? How wonderful. This place needs more celebrations." Emma agreed. They'd had their share of hardships, but lately, life had been kind. The cattle were thriving on the rain-fed grass. The partnership with Hartwell had evolved into something neither man had expected: genuine respect and cooperation. The vegetable business had expanded to supply 3 towns, with Sarah managing much of the day-to-day operations. Most importantly, the community that had once judged Emma so harshly had largely come around. Success had a way of softening sharp tongues, and her work during the drought had earned grudging respect even from the church ladies. Mrs. Ashford now bought eggs from her weekly and had even complimented Hope's dress last Sunday. That evening, as the family gathered for supper, Emma shared Margaret's news. The long table built by Colt to accommodate their extended household buzzed with excitement. "A Christmas wedding," Martha mused. "We'll need to start planning now. Food, decorations, where to put all the guests." "The new barn," Tom suggested. "We could fix it up real nice. Hang lanterns like we did for your wedding, boss." Colt nodded thoughtfully. "Could work. We'll have it closed in by then, floor laid." He looked at Emma. "What do you think?" "I think it's perfect. A barn built on hope, hosting a celebration of love." She smiled. "Very fitting." Cookie, who'd become more sentimental with age, raised his coffee cup. "To new beginnings and old traditions." "Here, here," the others chorused. As November progressed, the ranch transformed again. The barn rose quickly, solid and strong, built to last generations. Emma threw herself into wedding preparations with the same energy she'd once used to survive. But now, instead of fighting for basic dignity, she was creating beauty. She and Sarah made trips to town for fabric and supplies, Hope riding between them in the wagon. The same merchants who'd once looked at her askance now greeted her as Mrs. Harlan with genuine warmth. Amazing how time changes things. Sarah observed after a particularly pleasant interaction with Mrs. Ashford at the dry goods store. "Time and choices," Emma replied. "We all made choices, them to judge, me to persevere, and eventually, all of us to do better." One afternoon, while Hope napped and Emma worked on decorations, Colt found her in the parlor. He stood in the doorway, just watching her work. "What?" she asked, feeling his gaze. "Just thinking about that first day I brought you here. You look so lost, standing in this dusty room." "I was lost." She set down her sewing. "But you helped me find my way." "No," he crossed to her, pulling her up into his arms. "We've found our way together." They stood there, holding each other in the room where Catherine's portrait still hung, but no longer dominated. It was part of the past, honored but not haunting. "I love you," Emma said simply. "More than that first day, more than yesterday, probably less than tomorrow." "That's a lot of love," he teased, but his eyes were serious. "Think we have room for more?" She pulled back to look at him. "More?" His hand went to her still flat belly, and his meaning became clear. Emma gasped, then laughed, then kissed him soundly. Already Hope's barely a year. Spring baby this time. Martha confirmed it yesterday when you were in town. His grin was boyish. "Guess we better make that table even longer." Margaret and William arrived the week before Christmas, along with a surprising number of Austin guests. The banker turned out to be a jovial man with twinkling eyes and an immediate fondness for Hope, who took to him just as quickly. "She's perfect," Margaret declared, cradling her niece. "And this place, Emma, you've transformed it completely." It was true. The house that had once felt like a tomb now rang with laughter. Every room showed signs of life. Hope's toys scattered about, Emma's ledgers on the desk, fresh flowers even in winter thanks to the small greenhouse Tom had built. The wedding day dawned clear and cold, frost sparkling on the grass like nature's decorations. The barn had been transformed into something magical, evergreen boughs and red ribbons, hundreds of candles and safe lanterns, benches arranged to create an aisle. Emma, now showing slightly in her green velvet dress, stood with Margaret as she prepared.
"I'm nervous,"
Margaret confessed.
"Is that silly? I'm 35 years old. I shouldn't be nervous."
Love makes us all nervous, no matter the age. Emma adjusted Margaret's veil. But William's a good man. I can see how he looks at you. The way Colt looks at you, Margaret smiled.
With that mix of awe and contentment.
Something like that. The ceremony was beautiful in its simplicity. Margaret glowed as she walked down the aisle to William, who waited with tears unashamed on his cheeks. Reverend Michaels, much softened since Emma's wedding, spoke warmly of love's ability to bloom in any season. As the couple exchanged vows, Emma found Colt's hand. Hope, dressed in her finest, sat contentedly on her father's lap, playing with his watch chain. Around them, the community that had become family witnessed another beginning. The celebration that followed rivaled Emma and Colt's ranch wedding. Music filled the barn. Couples danced, and children ran between the adults' legs. The food a joint effort between Martha, Cookie, and several neighboring women disappeared at an alarming rate. "Speech," someone called as the evening wore on. "Let's hear from the bride and groom." William stood, pulling Margaret up beside him. "I'm a man of numbers, not words," he began. "But I know that the best investments are in people, not profits. Margaret is the finest investment I'll ever make." "Smooth talker," someone called out, earning laughter. Margaret took her turn. "A year ago, I thought my life was settled. Spinster aunt, that was my role. Then Emma here showed me that it's never too late to choose a different path. She came to this ranch as a housekeeper and became its heart. She faced drought and gossip and turned them both into strength. She reminded me that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about acting despite the fear." She raised her glass. "To Emma, who showed me that love is worth the risk. To Colt, who proved that second chances are real. And to William, who convinced me that my story wasn't over, it was just beginning a new chapter." The toast was drunk with enthusiasm. Emma felt tears prick her eyes as Margaret hugged her tight. Later, as the party continued, Emma stepped outside for air. The winter night was crisp, stars brilliant in the clear sky. She heard footsteps and turned to find Sheriff Harlow, older now but still sharp-eyed. "Fine party," he said, lighting his pipe. "It is. You've done well here, Emma. Better than well." He puffed thoughtfully. "I remember that scared girl in a saloon, trying to keep her dignity in an undignified place. Look at you now, respected businesswoman. Mother, heart of this ranch." "I had help." "Sure, but help only works if you're strong enough to accept it." He pointed his pipe at the barn, where laughter spilled out with the light. "That in there, that's what community really means. Not everybody thinking the same or living the same, but choosing to celebrate together anyway." As if to underscore his words, Hope toddled out, having escaped from whoever was watching her. "Mama." Emma scooped her up, kissing her cold, reddened cheeks.
"What are you doing out here? Little escape artist?"
"Let me," the sheriff offered, holding out his arms. Hope went to him willingly, fascinated by his badge. "She'll have you wrapped around her finger in no time," Emma warned.
"Already does."
Harlow made faces at Hope, earning delighted giggles.
"This one's going to be something special. I can tell."
They stood there, the former saloon girl, the aging lawman, and the baby who represented hope itself, watching the celebration through the barn windows. Inside, Colt was dancing with Sarah while Tom played fiddle. Martha was teaching William some complicated step, Cowboys mixed with townfolk, ranchers with merchants, all united in joy. "We should get back," Emma said eventually,
Before Colt sends a search party.
as they walked back to the barn, Hope now drowsing on the sheriff's shoulder. Emma felt a deep contentment settle in her bones. This was what she'd fought for, though she hadn't known it at the time. Not just survival, but abundance. Not just acceptance, but family. Not just a house, but a home. The party lasted until nearly dawn, guests gradually departing with warm farewells and promises to visit. Margaret and William would stay another week before heading to San Francisco for their honeymoon. The ranch would return to its rhythms: cattle and gardens, ledgers and laughter. But for now, in the last hour before sunrise, Emma sat in the barn with her family. Hope slept in Colt's arms, worn out from excitement. Margaret leaned against William, radiant with happiness. Martha dozed in a chair while Tom and Sarah quietly cleared plates.
Thank you,
Margaret said softly.
for opening your home, for showing me it's never too late to take chances,
Thank you, Emma replied.
for accepting me,
For seeing past what everyone said to who I really was.
Family sees clear,
Margaret said simply. Always has, always will. As the first light of dawn touched the windows, painting the frost pink and gold, Emma reflected on the journey that had brought them all here. From dust to plenty, from judgment to acceptance, from loneliness to love multiplied. She placed a hand on her growing belly, where new life quickened. Another chance, another hope, another link in the chain of family they were forging. Time for bed, Colt said softly, standing with Hope still sleeping in his arms. Tomorrow's a new day.
the best kind,
Emma agreed, rising to join him.
the kind we get to choose for ourselves.
They walked to the house together as the sun rose over Harlan Ranch, painting their world in colors of promise. Behind them, the new barn stood strong and solid, ready for whatever storms or celebrations might come. And in the kitchen garden, despite the winter cold, the sage and rosemary grew green and fragrant, proof that with care and courage, life finds a way to flourish in even the harshest ground. The story of the girl who asked, "Where do I sleep tonight?" had found its answer. She slept peacefully, surrounded by love, in the home she'd claimed through choice and courage, where every dawn brought not fear but possibility. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss your thoughts on Emma and Colt's journey. If you enjoyed this tale from the Old West, please subscribe to Wild West Night. Give this video a like and hit the hype button to help more people discover these stories of love, courage, and redemption. Until next time, partners.